we go down to karma, at the deepest karmic level, karma is action. Karma even exists at the thought level. We create it with thought. We ultimately create the full vibrations when we speak, when we act, when we move.
This is synchronicity.
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 Welcome to Synchronicity. Guess what? You may have guessed from the person speaking in the beginning of this, the little intro there, that I have a guest this week. And also maybe the title. If you're listening to this, you probably saw the title. Kathleen Whalen, Vedic Astrologer, creator of something I've been using. Didn't know who she was. Got introduced in a very roundabout way. I was using something she created and got introduced in another way to her personally from someone else. She's the founder and creator of this conscious calendars thing. It's incredible. There's links on this podcast episode, the website, syncpodcast.com. Just go and check her out. Look her up. She's the best. You'll see why in this conversation. Second time I've spoken to Kathleen, but equally as pleasurable as the first time. She's just really well-versed in a lot of different things. As you know, if you've listened to this show, I have an interesting relationship with astrology. I'm not like crazy into it. I don't follow it. I don't read about my horoscope and planetary bodies, but my good friend Adam Summer and Kathleen now, and a lot of my other friends are super into astrology, and I get it, and I clearly feel the impact of a lot of these things. I allude to it in the beginning of our conversation with Kathleen, which you'll hear, but I went to the sound bath in Woodstock last night, and I tweeted, because I am slowly morphing into my ultimate form of being a person who does that kind of stuff, and it was awesome. I highly recommend, if you're in the area, Sage Yoga, I think that's where I was last night. Yeah, in Woodstock. Amazing. Maybe I'll see you there at some future sound bath or some other cool stuff they do there. It was very nice. But yeah, I'm really, I'm digging this conversation. Things are slowly but surely getting placed back into order. This podcast, in case you haven't been able to tell, it really is a good insight into what is going on in my life. Maybe not specifically or explicitly all the time, but when I start having guests on again, I start getting into a flow where I can have conversations with people freely, not stressed out. That's good. It's good for everyone, myself included. So I'm not going to ramble on too much here. Cryptocurrency is still going on. You're probably sick of it. The only place, and you'll have to forgive me if you don't care, and it's only going to take about 10 seconds, 15 seconds or so. The only place I advertise this stuff is this podcast on my personal social media profiles. No, I don't pay for this shit. I don't want to get it out there. I only want people who would already be listening to something like this to be the people who find CryptoSync, which is the cryptocurrency Discord server. Eventually, I imagine if this again approaches, mass consciousness levels where everyone's tuned in, you might be interested in joining. If you are, you can go to syncpodcast.com. Just fill in the little email thing. If you've been there recently, you've probably seen it. You're probably annoyed. Here's a little tip. If you never want to see it again, put in your email. You can email me and say, I hate you. Why are you making this pop up all the time? We'll have a fun conversation about that. Anyway, that's the little advertisement. Please go check out Kathleen, Conscious Calendars. There'll be a little thing at the end of the episode. And also any place where you see this online, there will be links where you can go and check out Conscious Calendars. Very cool. I actually use it. Something I actually use. I used it, then I met her, now I'm advertising it. That's okay. I'm okay with that. Ethics passes the checklist there. Okay, without further ado, here is Kathleen Whalen. From my end, don't worry, we're good. All right, we're good to go.
Yeah.
How are you?
Great. How are you? It's a green day.
Is it a green day? So far,
Yes.
not feeling like a green day so far, but we'll see how it's. I'm not surprised though, because I am going to a sound healing thing tonight, and I rarely go to these things. I have been to sound healing stuff before, but
Sure.
it's an
As a musician,
auspicious
I'm
thing.
sure it's, yeah.
I love them. I love them.
Yeah.
So today, before we start, I mean, I'm already recording, but we're probably not going to use this. Is before like officially starting, is there anything you specifically would like to cover? Otherwise, it's it's just a free ranging conversation, or anything you would like me to specifically mention, or conversely not mention.
Oh, I don't think so. In my mind, as much as the topic of conscious calendars may come up in the conversation, I really think the most interesting piece is just talking about the cycles of time, and that it would be something, because that's kind of a different perspective that I bring that only one other Vedic astrologer tends to do, but it's the history. So I love to talk about the history and the context of when we are. I don't know if people are into that.
They're into it. Listen, at this point, here's the truth. I've done so many
down the rabbit hole.
I've annoyed everyone so much with cryptocurrency that they're just relishing anything that isn't specifically me talking about that for an hour. So awesome. Cycles of time sounds great.
Well,
right.
as it relates to
without a doubt.
Economy.
Don't get me wrong. We'll certainly be talking about that. And like the truth is I've really been delving into this Alexander Hamilton biography by Ron Chernow.
Yes, I know. Isn't it incredible?
It's the best thing I'm listening to it on Audible, and it's like,
even better probably.
It's incredible. It's the best thing I think I've ever read, listened to, ever. It's just so good.
It's so funny because my husband actually read the book well before Hamilton had begun.
Nice.
So I was hearing all of this. I'm an American history buff. He's an American history buff. He reads way more about it than I do even.
Yeah.
And I was getting all the download before the play even came out. So it's just so incredible to watch all of this unfold.
That is so cool because I have never been an American history buff ever in my life. And this hooked me so bad. And like I think I mentioned, I'm living in the Hudson Valley, so we're steeped in this stuff. But oh man, it is so awesome. So let's just consider ourselves recording, but I'll welcome you nonetheless. Kathleen, thank you for doing this. I'm really excited we're getting a chance to do it.
Oh, it's my pleasure, and this is such a treat.
So we don't actually know each other all that well. We've spoken once before. I've been a fan of something you put together called the Conscious Calendars, which I'm sure we'll get to, but you're a Vedic astrologer, and I thought maybe it'd be nice if you could give kind of an overview as to what that means and kind of maybe even some of the differences at some point between Western astrology and Vedic astrology, and then how it fits into your life as a human being, not just as an abstraction. I thought that'd be a cool place to start.
Wonderful. Well, it actually took me a number of years to even mention that I was a Vedic astrologer because I come from a world of science. So I was trained as a biochemist and actually went to medical school, practiced as an acupuncturist and Chinese medicine practitioner for a number of years, and was actually using Vedic astrology with my clients. But Vedic astrology is really considered one of the most ancient forms of astrology. And, there's just a few differences between Vedic astrology and Western. And the thing that most people meet first is that the map is different or appears to be different. It's really just the same map an astronomer uses. We stand on the earth, we look to the sky. Those are called the fixed stars. So when something passes between us standing on the earth and the sky, that's the constellation we say something is in. It's called sidereal. And it appears to be 23 degrees different than Western. So like right now, we just had a new moon in Pisces in Vedic astrology. But with equinox today, right now, a Western astrology map would say it's in Aries.
Right.
So it appears to be almost about a degree off, but it's really 23 degrees. Your take home from that is that your sun sign could possibly be the same between Western and Vedic, but it might be a whole constellation different, which appears to be disorienting for some people. But really, all the angles between the planets, all of what was happening in the sky at the moment of each person's birth or event or the birth of a nation that we're going to talk about today.
Right.
All of that, the angles are all the same. It's just what's the vantage point. So that's kind of the first thing that most people meet. But the two big takeaways of the major differences between the systems are that the Vedic system actually uses the moon as the most powerful point because it's the source of consciousness. So, and it's literally the system that the word karma comes from. Lots of other people talk about karma, but this is really where it comes from.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. And so yoga, Ayurveda, Vedic astrology actually are all linked, and they actually were all practiced together by the ancient rishis, but also the ancient families that practiced all of these together. So they often were not separated, and they were the councils to the kings and mayors and such.
Right.
So with the consciousness connected with the moon, our sun personality is what we present to the world. So that's our ego, who we are. And as we develop and evolve, this is related to the moon, the ascendant, all the other planets. And Western astrology does look at this, definitely.
Right.
It's just that the moon, it really is the center of sort of our template of what we get to work with. And then the third major difference is this really cool thing called planetary cycles. And that is what gets so cool when we start to talk about the evolution of nations. So people have birth charts, nations have birth charts. And so what happens is only during this time period, this yuga, does this certain planetary cycle always occur for 120 years. And every single person goes through it. It just is, we each have a different section of that is lighting up our consciousness. So it adds a complexity, which often is why people call it predictive, because there's your chart, which is your consciousness, and there's the promise of what you have to work with and what you're working with, and as you evolve, and then the planetary cycles light up a portion of the chart, which says, oh, I'm interested in going to school now. Oh, I want a relationship. Oh, I want a family. Oh, I want to make money. Oh, I want to run away and travel around the world. It lights up the consciousness in a way that appears to feel like timing. And then there's all the other things with transits on top. So it adds a third layer of complexity that literally allows for often precision in understanding timing of things, but most importantly, on an individual basis, where is our consciousness lighting up? So even if a lot of good is going on around us and we're in a certain kind of cycle that's lighting up our consciousness in a way, we may not even be able to see the good, or vice versa, be going through difficulty and still just seeing the good in things and able to move forward, all based on our consciousness, but what piece of it is lighting up.
Right. Well, I've never heard. Help? Yeah, that helps so much. I've never heard it described like that, and it's fascinating to hear that these different kind of planetary alignments would light up certain facets of our consciousness. And you also said something that struck me, which is this sense of timing. And this is something that I think about a lot because I've spoken about it on this podcast, and a lot of people, even just if they're coming from, the scientific and physical realm, quantum physics, I joke that I don't believe in time. Like, obviously that it's linear, and of course we perceive it in that fashion. I'm not delusional, but that when it all is said and done, you have some experiences that make you kind of question that. And one of the things I often think about when I ponder that is there are times in life, periods in life, where everything just feels like it's happening at the perfect time. Sometimes you realize it retrospectively, but sometimes you're lucky enough and fortunate enough to be in the flow and be like, wow, this is happening exactly when it was supposed to happen. And that, to me, I've always been looking for some type of insight into how we view that and what potentially could be going on. And that specifically where modalities like astrology, I think, have tremendous benefit for us, because I can imagine there are people, of course there are people, and usually they're not listening to this show, but who look at all astrology kind of askance and say, oh, well, what did this really do? This is not, and obviously this is a reductionist, materialist viewpoint, but to me, the real interest and ability of this is if you are sensitive or intuiting these things already and you have any modality that can help shine a light on what's going on, you'd be foolhardy not to investigate it. So yeah, that was incredibly helpful. And so how let's talk about your transition from biochemist. I mean, what was going on there? Did you always have an interest in planetary bodies or astrology? Like, what was the...
Great question.
Yeah.
But I just want to tag on something you said.
Yeah.
Because when you're talking about everything coming together, it's so funny that you reference Vedic astrology, because I actually think your background is, I thought you were actually going to say something about, like, what's interesting is how to create more of those experiences where everything feels like it's coming together, which to me, music is all about.
Yeah, totally.
Right. So your background is about going into flow states for long periods of time and, the incredible language that music is. Right. And as we know, when we get very deep into these things, science and music and very often ritual all take us into these flow states.
Yes.
So it doesn't matter if you hit flow state from making quilts, right? It's what's interesting is flow states often can put us into, or as many Taoist practices, Qigong, all of the meditative practices or mindfulness can actually help us tap into this in ways that allow us to make decisions quickly and just not question things. And that's why I think also executives and people who are into effectiveness get into meditation or music or other things that help them tap into these flow states more. So I just wanted to mention that. Yeah,
no, definitely. I think that's really important. I mean, I often wonder about flow states. I don't know if I mentioned in our call, I've said it on this podcast as well, that I was once, in a flow state, a psychedelic state for 3 months, unending, through dream state as well. So like everything, and not on psychedelics that whole time, but it precipitated that. And so I am abundantly familiar with flow states. Usually, I'm so familiar that I've completely transcended the awe for the most part of synchronicities and things like that. And I really do try to kind of non-judgmentally figure out like what's going on. Like what is, I'm not going to get stupefied by these things happening, but trying to really investigate, like what is this? What insights can we gain here? So, yeah. But also I really, go ahead, please.
Oh, but live your life just following those flow states.
Exactly.
That's all.
Yeah. So talk about your transition though, biochemistry. When was the seed planted though in this lifetime?
Well, I think it's kind of funny. I think the two major seed sites, you could say it was the fact that I was almost born in Taiwan. We actually went to Taiwan when I was 6 months old during the Vietnam War. And it was end of 66. And we were in Taiwan for 2.5, 3 years. And so I was surrounded by this other culture in which I didn't really speak. And it just so happens that later in life, I did end up practicing Chinese medicine. And so I had 3 languages and 1 dialect spoken to me as a child. So I do think that affected my consciousness in a way that was very different than my siblings, because they were all in the American school.
Yeah.
So I think there was something about that and the culture that opened my mind in a different way. And I have to say too, my father is actually a world-renowned doctor. His father was as well. So there was a lot of pressure, implied pressure. Not just, I love science because I could connect with my father and have these incredible conversations. And I do know that I noticed that our time in Asia made him a better doctor. He actually used all the Chinese medicine techniques integrated into his differential diagnosis. So I grew up with that. Not only the culture, but also this ability to analyze not just people's health states, but be able to very quickly assess situations. So I do see that as feeding into what I eventually do now. And it made me a much better practitioner when I practiced Chinese medicine and acupuncture. So fast forward, ironically enough, the second major time was at Bard College. We have that connection between us. Was actually, I was in the writing program before Bard College. And there's a special program called, I think, Learning and Thinking to get us prepared for college. And in that program, I met someone who was older than me, and she became a companion, and she actually was using all of these strange techniques like orthomolecular medicine and acupuncture and homeopathy. And I'd never heard of these things. Simultaneously, we were studying the classics. And I immediately just knew while we were studying both the European history and the Chinese classics that I just said out loud, I'm going to be a Chinese medicine practitioner.
Yeah.
And from that moment forward, everything else fell into place. Okay, I went to medical school to jump through the hoop. Okay, I didn't finish it. Okay, I studied. I did incredible internships at Baylor at MD Anderson Cancer Institute as even a high schooler, published in journals.
Wow.
Went to Baylor College of Medicine. I actually worked in a neuroscience lab there after I quit medical school. So I was doing all of that the whole time, already had known I was going to do Chinese medicine. And after I was practicing when I was in school of Chinese medicine, I touched Ayurveda the first year of school. So I actually went into a certificate program and began weaving Ayurvedic herbs into my practice pretty much from day one. So I was already touching the foundation of Vedic astrology and didn't know it.
Wow.
Years later, I connected with my teacher because someone said they had seen him for something else. I didn't even know he was a Vedic astrologer. I went to see him, and he basically in the session predicted my husband was going to propose to me. And he said at the very latest, the last day of the year. My husband moves a little slow, proposed to me on the last day of the year.
That's crazy.
And so I began integrating somewhere in that following year. I had people's birth times. So I had 15 years of my clients and their birth times. And I began drawing up their charts with this little baby chart thing and just noticing. So I was doing 20 charts a week.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a lot of charts.
Yeah, it is. And so I somehow transitioned by looking at my own chart, seeing that I would become ill if I continued on my path in the way I was.
FYI just reminded me, I got the flower stuff because I have the dentist tomorrow. It came yesterday.
Oh,
so,
yes. The flower essences. Wonderful.
Yeah, I'm super excited about that. I think there's so many different, layers that are interesting to me in your story. And I've often spoke about this, which is, astrology. I have a very odd relationship with astrology. I've only ever had a Vedic astrology reading. I've never done a traditional one. It's not something I ever actively seek out, but is consistently presented to me so many, a comical amount of times where I'd really have to be a doofus to ignore it. But it always seems to be such a beacon for so many people in terms of illuminating certain aspects of either their personal life, and something that you brought up in the beginning, which is to me equally as fascinating, our collective stories and our global stories and our cultural stories that this influences as well. And someone who kind of brings this stuff together for me, and one of my big heroes, it was Carl Jung, who also had an avid interest, especially in Western astrology. So what, as you approached this, I guess, from a health, right? From a body standpoint originally with the medical stuff, but clearly there's so many other dimensions to this that kind of like percolate in someone's consciousness. When did you kind of note, so you made the decision to do the Chinese medicine, you're like, okay, I get it. When did you start kind of weaving in these other things? What are some of the crystallizations in terms of that this solidified for you? Yeah.
Well, it was when I was actually going through the training program. I actually happened upon a book, from Barnes and Noble. There's a little CD in the back. So I read the book, and ironically enough, it was actually my frustration with the process of saying, oh, my sun is here, my moon is there, and and I was like, I was so frustrated with the results. I'm like, what does this all mean? So I, of course, then just signed up with my teacher to get this deeper teaching. And as I was going through it, somewhere around 50 hours, I went back and forth and went, oh, right. Like what happens to every student when they come to this, it's like, oh, look, I have this, that's good. Ooh, I have that, that's bad.
Right.
And so ultimately the irony is that of course, after 50 hours, it was like, oh, it's me and
Yeah.
all my foibles and my strengths. And oh, I
Right.
see places I can develop better, places of weakness. Oh, right. And so it was really at that point, somewhere in those last 10 hours, that I was like, oh my God, this can help people understand their path and what their best profession is. It was like my first, my realization. Like, I thought it was a genuine first realization, like, oh my gosh, look at this. You could help someone figure out their profession.
Right.
You can help them understand, like, the timing of things and who they are. It was just, it's just such a beautiful experience. And that was I think that was in 2002 that I had that experience. So, and then I began integrating it into my practice. So that's really, as you had mentioned, lighting the path.
Yes.
The word Jyotisha, the actual Sanskrit word is Jyotisha. And that means eye of the Vedas. It is about light illuminating our lives. It's a light that's like beyond us. And so ultimately, that's also why, in terms of timing, I won't do sessions on certain days because the light doesn't shine as brightly.
Right. So talk a little bit. What I also really love about Vedic astrology is I love the moon. I am clearly very influenced by the moon, not only because, my sun sign is a Cancer, but like I inevitably, if I'm on a sleeping schedule and there's a full moon, it's going to keep me up without fail. And I won't know why. And then I'll be like, is it a full moon? And then it's always a full moon. And just like the planetary stuff always seems to be, there's always some major event. And I just feel it very heavily, but especially the moon. I also like what the moon represents symbolically across many cultures. Is the moon Rahu
No.
That's the sun?
No, the moon is the moon.
What's
Rahu? Rahu is a node of the eclipses. So Rahu and Ketu, and this becomes the disruptive forces in society.
Yes.
We take it to another level, the ethos. And that's what I love about understanding history, is that so we'll take it back to a daily level, and I'll take it to the big cultural level.
Awesome.
What's so incredible about your question is that yes, we have the waxing and the waning of the moon, and that's actually embedded within the Vedic calendar. Is literally it counts first lunar day, second lunar day, all the way up to the full moon. And those days are lunar days. So there's 2.5 lunar days per constellation. So there are different energies each day. There's even deep esoteric practices, and I can give a fantastic giveaway right now that I love to do, which is there's something called Swara Yoga, and it's actually the practice that our breath shifts nostrils in dominance every either hour to 2 to 3 hours, depending on your personal constitution. And that actually also shifts according to the lunar cycle before sunrise. So one of the big takeaways, and this is kind of who I am, like if people never hear anything beyond this, this is something everybody can test and use right now. One of the ways to help align with our personal natural rhythm and the moon and the sun without even knowing what's going on outside is that if anyone is sitting right now or sitting in a car or standing in a certain place, if we check our nostril right now in this moment, and some people, you just block one side, block the right nostril and breathe through the left and block the left and...
Mine's left.
Left. Yep, mine's left. And so when you go to change state from standing or sitting or just having gone to the bathroom or you're getting up from your desk or you have a really bad call, you want to change state. If you step with the same foot as the nostril, you're actually realigning with your personal natural rhythm. And that's aligning you with the sun and the moon in the moment.
I can use this often these days.
I use this every morning when getting out of bed.
That is something that I'm definitely going to use. I mean, I've truthfully just in the past few days, I don't find it. Can you hear my dog in the background barking?
I can a little.
Yeah, he's going to do that. Hold on one second. Maceo, come on, man. Please. I've been taking, he's a dog. What can you do? But I've been really taking my wellness seriously, especially in the past few days, because I had been wearing myself down. And I think I was also in the throes of a lot of these, planetary events, which in the past I think I had no knowledge of. And now I'm not like actively aware, but I'm more aware, at least of lunar cycles. And I really am taking it kind of the responsibility upon myself to really try to attune to these subtler things that maybe some people would outright dismiss, but at least for me feel like real kind of signals to pay attention in certain different areas. And I'm definitely, the aligning yourself with the moon is something I'm trying to do. Let's just put it like that.
And what's so beautiful about the ancient practices, and especially because I come from science, is it's just like, great, test it.
Yes.
Sure, question it, test it.
It's my favorite
Is it true
part.
for you? And if you test it once and it doesn't work, that doesn't mean it's not necessarily true. It could be your level of awareness, or it could be that it's not true. So keep testing, right? And so again, just stepping with the same nostril as the dominant side can align you. Try the opposite sometime and see what happens.
Yeah. If you're really feeling bold.
I mean, when you don't have to do anything important. Yes.
Yeah. Don't put yourself out of alignment on purpose. Typically, it's not the wisest move.
Sort of like checking Gestalt dream, a yes or no answer. If you say, oh, I'm going to do A before going to sleep, and then wake up in the first hour of the next day, you're just surly and upset, then I'm going to do A is probably not the right answer.
Yeah, that's really...
So again, test it. If we do the opposite side and you're surly for an hour, then okay.
So let's extend this idea. What could we do, or how do these time cycles influence our ability, both individually and collectively, to maybe attune ourselves to the moon or other energies? Because collectively we have to do this too, right?
Right. And so this is where the two other answers, thank you for always bringing me back. So the 2 points that I was going to make about the cycles of time are that, well, there's the moon, right? The moon is very transient, right? And so that's on a personal level. Where we get the bigger cycles of time. And what's interesting is, so like conscious calendars basically is a pulse of the day. It's literally a pulse of the day around the world. And so when certain things come together, those energies are what we call green days. Mm-hmm. Today has to be a green day, but the end of the day ends up being a little more rambunctious. Mm-hmm. So it will be an interesting mix, but it's about the energy at your location before sunrise. Gives energy to the day, which is our group collective experience. Yes, we will always have our individual subjective experience with that. Not everybody likes the sunshine.
Yeah.
Oh my God, 5 days of sunshine. Some people just are not so happy with it. Other people are elated.
It's true.
So again, it's about the common ground of what our experience is. And so like the calendars are bringing together the moon with every single planetary influence, Mars, Saturn, Jupiter. It's about whether the moon is aligned with the positive forces to create positive energy between people. Or when there's difficulty, it's like, oh yeah, maybe don't go out today, or keep meetings to a minimum, or, find other ways on your commute. Or if the line is long, when you walk into your favorite coffee shop, just turn around, right?
Yeah.
So that's on that daily basis. The bigger cycles of time have to do with Jupiter, Saturn, and the eclipse patterns. So the eclipse patterns, in essence, are a 19-year cycle. And Saturn has an influence over the course of 30 years, and Jupiter has an influence over the course of 12 years. So what happens is when all of these energies begin to align, like say back in 2013, when Saturn with Rahu, one of the disruptive forces. Now we know cryptocurrency and Bitcoin was not invented then, but 2013 was a significant year for Bitcoin. And what happened was not just cryptocurrency, but that year, the planet of science and the planet of man-made materials were together for the first time in an extremely long period. And it was those combinations that previously brought us the telegraph, that previously brought us aerospace engineering, the materials that we have to have on planes to make them work. We had new materials being invented for architectural embedding to make LEED green buildings. So often the invention of something and when it comes public are not always the same. And so very often I'm predicting something that's coming into being and it hasn't quite made it mainstream yet, but you'll see it in all the Scientific American magazines.
Right.
Look at these materials. Oh, look, a battery embedded into, someone's heart for their pacemaker that's millimeter thin. So it's these materials so we can see the cycles of invention that will affect huge portions of the world with the larger planets and the larger cycles of time.
Right.
And we're talking even longer cycles than 120 years.
Like
so 120 years is what a nation's cycle will go through. These other cycles can be 180, even longer, these other cycles that affect consciousness on the planet or ethos.
Right.
So when certain things come together, we're all influenced a similar way. We have to have the second industrial revolution and the third industrial revolution to be developing. Right. Now, a lot of that is because of the United States being the source of the third industrial revolution, both the second and the third, but we see very similar patterns between US and Europe and the development of these technologies.
Yes, yes. Well, let's segue right into my newfound love of this country. And we were talking about it is this Hamilton biography. You know, one of the things it's truthfully for anyone who doesn't know what I'm talking about, Ron Chernow did a biography of Alexander Hamilton, which is truthfully the greatest thing it is just amazing in so many different ways. But one of the things that really became clear to me outside of Hamilton setting up our financial institutions and really setting up politics and just so many different things that we would never even think about, like one person or a small group of people did, is this great schism that was created at the beginning of our country, right? This divide that eventually turned into the Civil War, but truthfully can almost be traced back to three people, which was Alexander Hamilton and then Thomas Jefferson and James Madison. This is a really crucial thing to understand because as time goes on and we get more insight into the past, we can really see just how this set the trajectory and these people's viewpoints really set the trajectory of this country. And we're talking about 120-year cycles. Mm-hmm. We're talking about exactly where we are 120 years earlier, these cracks in the foundation beginning to really take root. It's a fascinating thing. And then at the same time, like you're talking about these raw materials and these broader cycles, we have cryptocurrency and these other kind of financially, shaking things emerging. So, I mean, even if you don't believe in any of this stuff, it's hard to discount that, at least in terms of the time frame we're talking about, the shorter time frames, 120 years or so, this stuff is definitely happening. It's not even a question. So and
the evolution of it, right? That's what's just so mind-blowing to me.
Yeah.
Is as you mentioned, Madison, Jefferson, Hamilton, the 120 years ago, some of the things that I like to kind of touch upon are to remember that 120 years ago, we were still on the gold standard.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And so much of what Hamilton had set up was working. And we did change things by having quantitative easing and printing money.
Yes. With
this last potential implosion of the financial system.
Yes.
So the previous time, a lot of people point to the Depression in the 20s or, 29, 30s. Yeah. So as like the big deal, but people do not like what's so interesting to me is actually the crashes that occurred in the 1890s.
Yeah.
This is the time that we are in right now. Literally 1898 and 2018 are synonymous. Historically, I call it historical rhyming because it's not the same. Because as soon as we started printing money and we actually protected Bear Stearns and we kept all those companies from too big to fail.
Yep.
And created those protections, we actually started shifting what had happened. And ironically enough, back in the 1890s, one of the things that a lot of people forget, we know that a lot of these larger than life characters, all the way back to who you're referencing, but even the JP Morgans of the world, these are complex people. And regardless of the fact that they're robber barons and lived in the Gilded Era, people forget that JP Morgan poured a lot of his own money to stabilize the economy in the
Yes.
1890s because we didn't have the Fed, which is, again, a very interesting animal to talk about. Like, we may just talk about the Fed sometimes.
Yeah.
The evolution of it and how the karma of it, right?
Yep.
Because it's that private-public partnership that governs so much of our nation's stability, and it's not the government, people. It's a private-public partnership.
Yeah. No, that's the whole thing, is that it serves as this. I mean, this is going back to Hamilton too in a lot of ways. This idea that while you're not ever rooting for a true aristocracy, although that's what he was accused of, ironically, by Jefferson, is that
Right.
there is some level of financial responsibility for those who have it to maintain not social order in the sense of you behave the way you want, but if there's nothing that stabilizes or seemingly stabilizes the economy or any of this stuff, then shit just goes bonkers. Now, the problem is, and Hamilton even recognized this, is that there's always going to be a degree of self-interest. There's always going to be congressmen, speculating even in government
Yes.
debt. It's just a fact of the way things work. Now, what's fascinating to me about this at this point in time is this whole idea of debt and money and fiat and gold and all of this stuff is really beginning to come apart at the seams. And
right,
I don't.
because democracy finally
Yeah.
is democracy,
Yeah.
right? That people
Yeah.
are actually able to talk to each other
Yes.
around the globe, right?
Exactly.
It's a world democracy, and that's what that disruptive force of Rahu brings.
Yeah.
And so what's so cool, and I'll touch back on the chart of the United States,
Yeah.
is that in essence, and I'll give you an image if you want to post it on the podcast, is that the foundation of the nation, if I go from the chart July 4th, 1776, in essence, the chart of the nation actually has the disruptive, what's kind of considered the behind closed door deals in banking in the house of secrecy and the house of banking. So the very foundation of the nation, in essence, established that the agricultural workforces in the 10th house, Saturn, are connected with the fact that, oh yeah, the nation's going to always have some form of subsidy for farming.
Yeah.
Mercury retrograde with Rahu in the 8th house in the constellation of Cancer, in essence, is going to always have some kind of backdoor deals. And most importantly, the energy that's connected with all of it has to do with, in essence, that the aristocracy is kind of always making money on the backs of the small people.
Yeah.
And what explodes starting in 2013, and what's so interesting about the time right now, is that the eclipse patterns are came back to where they were at the birth of the nation currently. It started last year, and we're literally in the throes of it
Yeah.
now for 18 months.
I mean, I don't find it surprising, just because I've learned to let go of my own ego when I get really interested in things and understand that it's not always my personal interest. I mean, I've never cared about the creation of this country ever. I just, I either took it for granted, call it privilege, call it whatever you want. I never really thought about the foundations of it. But when you really do look at it, not just from a historical context, but from an astrological standpoint, as it sounds here, you see such clear patterns that just continue to play out over time, where it's not surprising that we find ourselves in these situations. And then, to me, the interesting question, and you talked about this in terms of predictive, not that these things are definitely going to happen, but what can we do to A, attune ourselves to the current energies and flows that are going on, and B, somewhat not wield them, but harness them in a way that would potentially move us towards a more ease-like transition? Because it seems like, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know what the charts say about this, but we are going through some heavy transitional periods, it would seem.
Yes, I mean, and what's so beautiful, and we could always at any time say we're going through a transition period, so I want to be careful about that.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And so in essence, what is so interesting is, in terms of cycles of the United States, not only are the eclipses back where they were when the nation was founded, we also have the fact that the cycle of the United States, the 120-year cycle,
Yeah.
that the cycle of Rahu began exactly September 25th, 2015, which is exactly when the real estate crisis went into a crash. I have a whole course that I've developed. I'm going to be piecing it together and probably, putting that out there somewhere in May. But in essence, I go into great detail and overlap all the history of the time period of then and now. But in essence, in 1895, September of 1895, the nation went into the exact same cycle. In September of 2015, our nation, the United States, went into the Rahu cycle. What that does is that touches upon the revolutionary energies of being able to change things. And at each of these points, we've been able to make choices as a society, as communities, and as individuals. And here's the irony, is that during that second industrial revolution in 1895, who do we get to bring in? Tesla. So Tesla in 1895, in fall of 1895, was installing his coils in Niagara Falls, not far from where you are, himself. And those coils are still there. They're still functional. They don't use them because they don't hold as much power, but they're still functional to this day. But what did we do when we created Niagara Falls? It was man wielding power over nature. That's what Rahu does. It takes us away from natural rhythms. Yes. What did Tesla also do? Now, Edison and Tesla both did this, and you could say someone was going to, but in essence, the other thing that his alternating current generators did, and his alternating current ability to send electricity long distances so that we didn't have power stations every mile, like Edison would have had us have. Yeah. In essence, what that disruptive force did was it brought, the power to the people. Yeah. Literally. Yeah. Right? Now, for some people who are rural, it still took a very long time to have telephones or a very long time to have electricity. But it brought power to the people. And at the same time, here's the irony. It helped us, on the one hand, go against natural rhythm. When we have light, I can stay up on my computer or watch TV or read books with lights on. I'm not going to bed at sunset like my grandparents did or my great-grandparents. And I'm not necessarily always waking up at dawn, right? And in winter, and us northern folk, we get very little daylight. Yeah. So the very electricity took us away from natural rhythm. And as we know, technology, we see that it literally changes our brain, right? Yeah. Being on a smartphone, it literally alters our not only neurochemistry, but our neural pathways. That's proven, right? And so in essence, it took us away from natural patterns. And at the same time, the choice between Edison and Tesla was the greener choice. So we also have the ability to go greener, to go more sustainable. And that's what's so beautiful about the cryptocurrency movement is not only is it disruptive, it democratizes the ability to send money to anyone in the world at any time. But as we know, all of the technology under it, the blockchain, which is what I was talking about back in 2010, is the disruptive forces in 2010, 2013, where, hey, everybody, Bitcoin's way cool, but it's this thing under it. It's the engine, the blockchain. That's the most interesting. Yeah. And that is what's allowing us to create the fully encrypted exchange of information or fully encrypted data. Yeah. And that's for big boys. And so this is what's weird is, of course, on the one hand, I'm a realist like you. The big boys, they're all creating their own industries of blockchain. We have bank consortiums, 2017 and into 2018 is like the movement of bank consortiums. Yep. So that's Jupiter in the 11th house of the United States, but it's also portending the movement of the year, which is most people who are in touch with Bitcoin and cryptos know that, the phase of, banks creating consortiums, right? That's they're going through that phase, everybody. The biggies like Microsoft and the big insurance companies are creating their own blockchains. At the same time, what we can do is that all of the cryptocurrency events, it's got to do with people gathering around events, right? That we can actually undo some of what the heads of government are doing. Because Jupiter basically often represents kings or those in power.
Right.
Saturn represents the people. And right now, as we speak, Saturn is in Sagittarius, connected with the people, aligned with galactic center if you want to get way out there. It's literally between our sun and galactic center. When this happens, we get huge transformation of how we understand the laws of physics.
Yeah.
And I could go off on that. That's a way cool thing.
Yeah.
Like we're literally
go off
understand.
on it.
Okay. So the part that's so cool about Saturn is that Saturn in the Vedic mythology is often associated with death. But when you really look at what Saturn does in the universe, it's often, in my opinion, associated with black holes. And what are black holes but the very source of plasma and co-creative force in the universe?
Right.
Saturn's also associated with soil and agriculture. Well, what is Hume? It's all the dead stuff of trees, people, animals that makes the soil. And it's the dead stuff that gives us new life.
Right, rebirth.
So black holes and the plasma that's spewed from it is the co-creative force of the universe. So from death comes the life. From the soil comes the life. So we see it on many levels, just outside our window or in a big theoretical sense. And the new theories that have come to pass recently are, we're finding these huge supermassive black holes that are bigger than we could imagine them being, so close to the beginning of the Big Bang, which, of course, I've said from very early on in my biology days that, like, I think there was something before the Big Bang. People.
Yeah, no shit. Thank you for saying that.
And so what they're finding is these supermassive black holes are so large. They're like, they couldn't have formed in that amount of time.
Right.
But now they're discovering new laws of physics that are, could theorize why that could come into being. Unless, of course, supermassive black holes were actually what came together to cause the Big Bang. And some of them as coagulated supermassive black holes then persisted as they kind of in a bumper car way bounced out from the center or forced together. So there's many theories. And of course, as we go along, we'll find out there's more of them. But what they're finding is the amount of energy that comes off from the supermassive black holes and how common they are gives an immense source of energy to the universe.
Yes.
Right. And so to me, that's what's interesting. And here we are, Saturn returning to the place between our sun and galactic center. That happens every 30 years. But at the same time, the way technology moves so quickly, 30 years is
a lot,
more than a lifetime, right? In terms of physics. So back to the metaphor. Thanks for letting me rip.
Yeah, of course.
Back to the metaphor is that in essence, what we can do, right? That's all cool stuff, but what do we do in our lives, right? Well, we know for a fact that all of us are battling the consummation of IoT, wearables, technology becoming embedded into everything. This is the third industrial revolution, right? And so that's influencing all of us around the world. And that battle, on the one hand, is going to bring more ability on a solar level to people in the middle of the Nairobi desert to be able to do transactions, to trade money, all of this, which is beautiful in that sense. But we're at that turning point where are we going to choose green technology, sort of an even greener version than what Tesla himself created? Right. So we are at the verge of a revolution. We're in the middle of it, and cryptocurrencies is one part of that.
Yes. Yes.
So if you're blown away by cryptocurrencies, imagine that's one piece of this whole beautiful unfolding. So I do think that because most of the people I connect with in the crypto world who aren't just about making the money,
right,
at the core are all about not just the democratization of information and sharing or sending of money, of sharing information and us co-creating things, but that in essence, we get to choose a greener foundation. So
yes,
with all of the mining, with all of the servers, there's now green mining and green servers.
So it's funny you're mentioning this, not to cut you off, but something that's been exploding recently is something called Bitcoin Green, which is literally a fork of Bitcoin, but is mined in a much more equitable and energy saving way. And it really is. It's not like a scam thing like Bitcoin
Right.
Cash. Yeah, I mean, that's what excites me about all of this too. I always describe the money making and the dollar cents aspect of this as the least exciting part of it, even though I'm not going to discount that that's a nice aspect. But the ability of freedom, it ends up giving us not only personally and, psychologically, spiritually, mentally, emotionally, but collectively is really where it's at, because we start to set up these trend lines and trajectories that really, if you let them play out, even with hurdles thrown in front of them, really just lead to a better future for our kids. And we don't have to have this hopeless. Listen, I'm also the type of person who views this world as Maya, who views this world as samsara, which is not to say I don't believe it exists and don't believe that there's any real importance to it. But I also recognize it's a layer of reality, in the same way my dreams are a layer of reality. And I try not to get too caught up in the situational and relational aspects while living life, which, always failing at on a day-to-day basis, but recognizing that you don't always have to have some set idea of beliefs of what will happen in the future, which this is a very interesting thing I'd like to bring up related to astrology and astrologers in general, is that the predictive aspect of astrology and other things doesn't take away the life and the mystery and the magic of what comes. It allows you to kind of swim in this endless ocean of possibilities in an open-minded way, rather than being like, hey, when is the best day for me to get rich? That's the most important thing. So that's something I've noticed with all astrologers who really take this seriously and tap into the mythic components of it. And it's important because I think a lot of people just look at it like, well, when am I going to die? When am I going to do this? When am I going to meet someone? And that, of course, has value, but really recognizing that you're tapping into something that's far grander than our personal narratives or even cultural narratives really gives a sense of perspective with this stuff.
Oh, I love that you brought that up. Because what's interesting is, and I think you know this at a visceral level, is that in essence, in Vedic astrology, half of all the ancient texts and of the oral lineage are, here is what happens when these combinations occur. A yoga is a union. So in a chart or under certain conditions, these things tend to occur. The other half are literally how to alter it. We have choice.
Right.
It's a gift. It's a gift given to us that, sure, I might have, whether you believe in reincarnation or not, cultivated certain talents and skill sets or ingrained habits or ingrained points of view. And I have choice in every moment. But I have the choice on Earth with the laws of gravity, right? And so there are some conditions in, I'm living in this time period. I'm not in the 1890s.
Yes.
So as a woman, great, I get to be doing this. So I'd be a suffragette probably, but in the 1890s. But ultimately, what happens is we always have choice. And in the gift that the Vedic knowledge has brought to us is that in essence, we're always evolving. And we always have choice in the set of current conditions.
Right.
So that predictive nature is more about ultimately, and now we're going to go really deep, it's ultimately to be used either to help us make a choice that could take us on either a deeper spiritual path or one of less suffering.
Right.
And sometimes that's saying, I have a stone in my shoe. Right? I'm going to take the stone out. It really is that simple. And other times it's literally to prepare us to be neutral. Ultimately, if we go down to karma at the deepest karmic level, karma is action. Karma even exists at the thought level. We create it with thought. We ultimately create the full vibrations when we speak, when we act, when we move.
Right.
When something happens, say spilt milk might be an example in your own household, right? So when things happen, how we react determines whether those ripples will continue into the future for us to be consuming them again. So when spilt milk occurs, are we neutral and just go, spilt milk, wipe up spilt milk? Or do we react, surprise, or do we react angry? how do we react? That reaction to the moment is actually in our consciousness what is creating the karma of our future.
Right. Right.
So all the people who are like, I'm canceling all my karma today, this moment. Well, not really. So, but we do have a choice in the moment, and neutrality. And that's how I like to use the predictive nature of Vedic astrology is if something's coming down the pike, you know, I'm a truth speaker. If something's coming down the pike and I'm setting things up to say something big to everybody, if something's coming down the pike, it's not to create fear. It's to create the settled mind that when it occurs, then we can say, okay, I'm not shocked.
Yes.
Let me be with this. And I can then move forward in action to then take care of a sick parent or to go step in and do more work at work in order to be, fulfill our duty or to maybe eventually get the promotion. But it's really about showing up in the way in which we choose wholeheartedly, not being in reaction. So that's the deeper spiritual principle of Vedic astrology, in my opinion.
Well, that's the story of this life for me, because I have a reactive nature, which I have, really not tempered, but, learned more about as I experience it in a lot of different ways. And I recognize that as I gain some level of inner awareness, or a slightly more aware inner level, my reactionary tendencies may not subside completely, but I gain more insight into when they're, where they're originating from. And exactly what you're saying, I'm the same type of, I recognize the same things, that your reactions to things and how you perceive things that are going to happen maybe anyway really determines not only the future states, but of course your present actions. And I also believe past in a nonlinear fashion. And I think we're constantly, and this speaks to my intuitive sense of why we incarnate as human beings, is we do this purposefully. I don't think this is just some weird karmic wheel that we just get thrown onto and have to figure out some way to get off at some whims of gods or demigods. I think that this is a choice. And if you look around the world, you'll notice that many people, many 7 billion people, all seem to kind of have the same type of problems, which to me is like a big wake up call, like, that's weird.
Together.
Yeah. So if you take that perspective, it begins to be more of like a training program or a test or a course or something, maybe not as
well. It's also the great playground.
That's what I was going to say. I was going to say something not as lame as that, where you actually have this level of autonomy to experience the things that maybe are going to be for the benefit of you. And now, for some people, that may mean that you're, a world famous athlete or celebrity. For some of us, that might mean you're going to be in jail, or you're going to be destitute, or you're going to have some really tragic suffering things. But if you can bring a level of equanimity, which is, I think, what you were bringing up there, to these situations, you're going to get the juice of them, which is, I think, what we're here for. So yeah, I love that you put it like that.
Yeah.
All right. So please.
And just to set up a little bit of the big heavy in terms of timing.
Yeah.
Is that there are some forces happening in 2018. Namely, we had some eclipses in February. There's eclipses every 6 months. But the nature of the eclipses in 2018 are unique in that it's not only the anniversary of where it was when the United States was founded, but there are some intense forces that are coming together that often are larger world events, and they can be somewhat explosive in nature. So in terms of, not that I'm giving any tips for people, but ultimately what happens is when certain forces come together, we know that there are probably going to be some events that occur. Now, there are bombs and events happening around the world all the time. We're so protected in the United States.
Yeah.
But in terms of the United States, there are some intense crossings that are occurring. And, I've got this, overview of the year, Golden Months webinar that I gifted to everybody at the beginning of the year. And in the PDF, and I'm just generating the dates right now, are that in essence, we've got coming up pretty soon 2 what I call intense zones of the year. And one of the intense zones begins roughly April 2nd, April 3rd.
Mm.
And that is simply, actually, let me bring it back. Hang on one second. There we go. Yeah, I'm gonna pull it back March 31st.
Okay.
March 31st through, give or take, I'm going to give it a full angle through April 3rd, 4th. So that is in essence when two of the intense planets that do not do well together, that are sometimes, they're explosive, but they're usually under the ground nuclear kinds of explosions.
Mm-hmm.
Or coal mine issues.
Mm.
This could also be an explosion in a coal mine. It's these kinds of events, and they could possibly be strategically influencing the United States as a nation.
Yeah.
Because it's in the first house of the United States. So when it's happened, these crossings have occurred before in other places of the United States, but because it's in the first house of the United States, it affects the body of the United States, right? So kind of that core ethos of it and its health. And it's also got to do with violence, right?
Yeah.
Two factions and violence. So it's sad because in some ways, what's beautiful is in the spring, we actually have the coming together of other groups of people that are actually creating harmony in the world. And in September 1st through October 11th of this year, oh my God, it's like the clouds are parting. And that's one of the golden zones.
Yes.
Where Venus and Jupiter are together in the house of harmony. And it's literally, we're going to have everything from, musical events to other experiences where groups of people who normally don't work together come together for peace and harmony. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, we have other events occurring after April where Mars is crossing the eclipse patterns.
Yes.
And just to give the last little bit of that, the eclipse patterns are simply an invisible mark in the sky that determine when in the past 6 months or in the future 6 months, where the sun, moon, and earth will appear to cross and create a solar or a lunar eclipse.
Right. So it's this spot where they'll link or cross.
Correct.
Gotcha.
Right. They'll cross. Right. And there's a couple different ways that that's calculated. So that spot becomes what I call like, like grease on a window.
Yes.
If you were to shake, if you were to take your three fingers and kind of move left, right, left, right, left, right.
Yes.
It's like this mark in the sky.
I see. Like an imprint. Right.
Like an imprint, like a greasy little spot where there's literally confusion that's created or disruption. And that disruption is always brought, right, to shake things up.
Yes. Well, I'm looking forward to this year for many, many different reasons. And I'm not saying that's positive or negative, but I feel that it's just going back from the 120 cycles that you were saying, the 1895 to 1775, we're in the middle of this stuff and there's a lot going on and everything does seem to be kind of intersecting in a very unique way. And I don't know if it's just a product of my own psyche developing as I get older, but things seem to be connected in in a explicit way now. And they continue to kind of come together that it's a fascinating period to be alive without
it's
a
just
doubt.
So beautiful, isn't it? Right.
It really is.
We're able to communicate in this way, right?
I love it.
120 years ago, you and I would not be having the conversation on the East and West Coast.
I know. We'd have to psychically do it like wizardry and stuff. And it's harder to be as reliable about it. So I end with three. I would love to do this again, obviously. Let's try to find another time in the not too distant future.
Sure.
But I end with three quick questions and then one larger question. Let's see if I can remember them. It's been so long. Let's see if I remember them. Okay. What is your favorite color?
Green.
What is your favorite number?
6.
What is your favorite animal?
Ooh. Horse.
Cool. Now, what's a practical tip that you could share with people listening? A practical tip that's helped you in your life?
Whenever you don't know what to do, make tea.
I love that. I'm going to go make tea right now. I'm not even joking. I'm going to go do that. It sounds amazing. Kathleen, thank you so much for doing this. I'm looking forward. Give people an idea of where they could connect with you online or anywhere else.
Yeah. One of my digital products that's the easiest way to get to tap into these rhythms is consciouscalendars.com. And I think you'll have a link that you can put on the podcast that directs your folks.
I will.
And that's really the best way. Also, we're on the Facebook page. If you simply type in I love Vedic Astrology.com, that redirects to the Facebook page. And then I'll be trying to make sure there's links to Instagram and other spots from there.
Awesome.
Oh, Instagram's, I think, at Conscious Cals. I'm either at Conscious Gal or at Conscious Gal.
I'll find it and put a link up. Regardless, I'll aggregate them all. Thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Oh, it's such a pleasure. Thank you for letting me kind of wander and riff like that.
It's the whole point of this. It's the whole point. All right, we'll speak soon. Thank you.
All right. Thank you again.
Bye-bye. How about Kathleen, everyone? So nice, so awesome, so smart, so wise. Go check out Conscious Calendars. I don't have to remind you again, do I? Really, I think you'll enjoy it. Really, she has given me an entirely new perspective on time cycles and how these things factor in. If you're interested, go check out that Ron Chernow biography of Alexander Hamilton. So good. So good. Thomas Jefferson, by the way. Thomas Jefferson is a dick. Every day Alexis gets home from work and I tell her, man, Thomas Jefferson was more of a dick I thought he was even than the day before. Just a really not cool dude. It's that simple. Fuck Thomas Jefferson. All right. Thank you for listening to this. We will have guests continuing. That'll be a thing. Thank you to Patrick Nemchek for becoming a Patreon patron. Say that 5 times fast. He gets an episode every week out because he donates the shekels. It's pretty cool. Thank you to all new patrons. Patreon has me saying the word patron now weird. So thanks for that, Patreon. There's stuff there. Music. Going to be uploading things on the Dropbox. Things you hear here. Going to be making more music. Time coming back to me. I'm digging it. I will see you guys next week.